Hey everybody, and welcome back to Maverick Games Learning and Support Services. Today we're going to be talking about a subject that's kind of near and dear to my heart, actually. It's something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and I thought I would introduce it to you. So what I'm going to talk about today is known as the Paper Challenge. That kind of all starts back at the beginning. Let's go way back. I've been playing D&D for about 38 years of my life now. I started playing when I was 12 years old, and it sunk its hooks into me and it never let go. Now, for those 38 years, I've mostly been playing as a dungeon master. I can only think of a handful of times where I actually played as a player. So I think that I have a unique kind of outlook on how to dungeon master. Some of my opinions might not be the most popular, and some of my ideas might be considered lame, but I do believe that I put in the time, and those 38 years have come with a lot of insight. So what exactly is the Paper Challenge? Well, the idea behind the Paper Challenge came when I recently started using Tailspire as my virtual table of choice for one of my groups. Now, Tailspire is quite literally just a virtual tabletop. It doesn't have any rule bindings or doesn't have any integration with any kind of rule system whatsoever. It's a virtual tabletop in its purest form. Now, having said that, it's a completely 3D virtual tabletop. And the inherent risks of running a virtual 3D tabletop with no integration is that you end up having the players focus on that 3D virtual table and sort of not realize that they're not playing a video game, and that their imagination sort of ceases to flow, and they just kind of default to what they see on the table and what you create within the 3D environment. And while that is a danger, I address it every time in my sessions, and we always talk about it afterwards to find out if their imagination is sliding one way or the other. So the Paper Challenge was born of the idea that quite literally in front of me now, I am literally using an actual tabletop. Now, while I'm not in person and I'm not using a tabletop around my kitchen table, quite frankly, is a virtual table. I can pick up miniatures, I can move scenery around. It gives me everything that I want to do in person and just puts it into the digital realm. And because of that, I thought, why not take it a step further? Why not make Tailspire an actual D&D in-person session, in the sense of, why don't I ask my players if they want to start using real tangible character sheets? Now, the default these days is D&D Beyond. In fact, I need to pull myself away from just defaulting to D&D Beyond whenever I onboard a new student as the way to introduce them to the hobby. D&D Beyond is, in my opinion, a very easy, streamlined process to make a character. But at the end of the day, when you're done making your character, you're left with a player who doesn't understand Dungeons & Dragons. You're left with a player who has a character sheet in the digital realm with a bunch of clickables and buttons they can click to generate dice roll results, but they don't understand Dungeons & Dragons, or at least the rule aspect of Dungeons & Dragons. This is proven by going back to my students time and time again and asking them if they understand why they have a +3 bonus in something, or why they have a to-hit bonus of +6. More often than not, the players don't even know how they arrived at those bonuses, but they know which button to click to get the result when the dice rolls across their screen. Now, you might be saying, well, that's okay, as long as they're having fun, and I agree. Dungeons & Dragons is all about having fun, but there's a certain educational benefit to playing the game, and growing up with Dungeons & Dragons in the 80s, I can safely say that my current education level and my ability to read, write, and do mathematics is a direct result of my playing Dungeons & Dragons as a young student. So how do we take that concept and how do we bring that back to a player who has a plethora of digital tools at their disposal that doesn't require them to have to actually go and learn anything? Well, welcome to the paper method. Now, I recommend that, again, using D&D Beyond, you go into the D&D Beyond character builder and go ahead and save the PDF of their character sheet. Go in and then print the PDF out. Now, be prepared for a horror show. The D&D Beyond character sheet, when it prints out, is, I think, roughly 3 to 4 pages long, and it's quite literally just a physical representation of the D&D Beyond interface spread out across multiple pages. You might want to take the time to craft and create your own custom character sheet. Now, I'll put some examples in the video here, but custom character sheets are a way to sort of disseminate the information and to sort of spread out the information how you think your particular player is going to be able to handle all that info, rather than just splashing it onto a piece of paper. Now, the next part of the paper method is the dice. Now, Tailspire, in this case, the tabletop that I'm currently using, but most virtual tables will have a digital dice roller, and that's cool, and that's something that you can continue to use. One of the things that I don't like about D&D Beyond is that it doesn't have a shared dice rolling experience. What I mean by that is it rolls its dice for the player, and the player does get to see some cool 3D dice, but those same dice rolls don't get broadcasted to the other players in the D&D Beyond session. With other virtual tabletops, a shared dice roll experience is almost baked in. Even Tailspire, which doesn't have a connection to Dungeons & Dragons rules specifically, you can actually pick up dice in the virtual environment and roll them for everybody to see. Roll 20, the list goes on, but shared dice rolling is a thing that I think is integral to Dungeons & Dragons. It builds up the anticipation, and it kind of, in a weird kind of psychological way, makes you think like you're playing the same game. However you decide to do it, whether it be physical dice and trusting the honor system, or using virtual dice built into the virtual table that you're using, the paper method should include some form of shared dice rolling experience. Lastly, notes. Notes are not fun for most players. In fact, my players don't like taking notes, although I do have a few that are very diligent about it. Now, Dungeons & Dragons is a shared storytelling experience, and I think it's important that Dungeon Masters actually tell their players that, hey, there's going to be some information coming at you that I think is important enough to help build the story. If nothing less, when you go back and you look at your notes years, decades later, you can have those notes as a memory, so to speak, of your time playing Dungeons & Dragons. Now, taking it a step further with me, I like to tease my players, and sometimes I'll throw out experience point quizzes where I'll challenge them on information I've given them and reward experience points if they've done a good job remembering that information or taking notes. Now, generally I play with younger players, so this is kind of an incentive for them. But if you do play with older players, I think it's quite easy just to say to them, look, grab a notepad, grab some paper, and make some darn notes, because I'm going to be telling you important stuff that's important for our shared story. So now that you got your paper character sheets, you got your dice, and you got your note-keeping capabilities, now you can launch into your paper challenge. Now, the paper challenge really is just a challenge in name. There's no rewards or anything to go along with it, but putting that paper in front of them and having them play Dungeons & Dragons without worrying about yet another screen that they have to reference, whether that be a side screen or a second monitor, they can focus on what's important and using their imagination, as well as perhaps your virtual environment, your map, all the things that really is important when you're playing D&D, and not so much your character sheet. Put one dice in their hand, or tell them to queue up that macro for their virtual dice, and just remember that D&D is primarily played with the D20, so there's not a lot of time that needs to be spent looking around a character sheet, looking for the right button to click. If you need them to do something and they need to make a roll, just tell them to roll the dice and we'll figure out the rest later. So I hope you like the idea of the paper challenge. It's something that I'm going to be rolling out across my table, so I'll definitely be keeping an eye on how it works with the players. And always do what's best for you at your table. Don't presume that my ideas are going to be the best ideas. Try them out and see if you like them, and hopefully you will. I hope you're all having fun playing Dungeons & Dragons out there, guys, and we'll talk to you soon. Before you go, I need your help. I'm trying to grow the exposure of what we do here at Maverick Games. My goal is to actually bring information to parents and students for fun, academics, and even support of neurodivergency. Please subscribe and make sure you click on those notifications. I don't do paid ads or sponsorships. And I hope that you can find content here that's enjoyable for yourself and maybe others. Thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.